Well, time now to look at what's making it big in the papers and the news websites with our regular reviewer, former BBC Wales journalist Stuart Hughes, senior producer in the BBC World Affairs unit, and Welsh programme maker and writer Carolyn Hitt. Morning, both.
Good morning, Vaughan.
Good morning, Vaughan. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Stuart.
Let's not spend all day saying good morning to each other. Carolyn, would you like to kick off?
Right, I'm going to start off, Vaughan, with the front page of The Observer, lockdown shaming being used to settle feuds. And it's just basically a story of grudge-bearing curtain twitching. Police chiefs are urging the public to stop exploiting the coronavirus pandemic to settle vendettas. Forces have reported that many people have been lockdown shaming as part of ongoing disputes. The police professional standards body have intervened to ask the public to curb deliberate false reporting and spreading misinformation to punish nuisance neighbours. And they're just given a few examples of the kind of things people have complained about with a bit of an agenda. The West Midlands Police Force, which is the UK's second largest force, had actually been dealing with up to 2,000 calls a day. It had to set up an online form. And the kind of thing people were complaining about were neighbours reporting somebody was walking their dog twice a day. And key workers have been mistakenly reported because they've been seen getting in and out of their cars several times a day. You can imagine all these kind of net curtains going through the day, can't you? Twitch. Somebody was, this is particularly intriguing, someone was reported for having, quote, different lovers around. And it links to another story in The Observer where they kind of explore the psychology of what's going on here. And it says, duty or score settling, the rights and wrongs of corona shaming. And they look at it from the other side. There's a lady whose son is asthmatic and she's becoming, she says, increasingly kind of obsessed with the behaviour of people around her. And she says that my neighbour never seemed to do any exercise before and now he's training like an Olympian out 2 or 3 times a day. And it is fascinating because I'm in lockdown with my 87-year-old dad in his house in the Rhondda, and we're on the main road here, and I am becoming obsessed with the boy racers of the Rhondda in their hot hatches, you know, kind of exploiting the quieter roads at various times of the day. But, even though I'm standing at the window, they're too fast for me to get the licence plates, I'm afraid.
And those little motorbikes with no number plates and all of that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
Stuart, what have you seen?
Questions of leadership in the Sunday papers today. Boris Johnson, of course, has been largely absent from our TV screens and the radio bulletins over the past week. He's at Chequers, of course, recovering from COVID-19, but he's very much the focus of the front pages of the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph this morning. And they have 2 very different angles on questions of his leadership. The Telegraph story could perhaps be seen as an attempt to reset his position as the man in charge of the government response to the pandemic. Their headline is Johnson starts to take back control. Do you remember that phrase?
I remember that phrase, yeah.
For at least a month. The Sunday Telegraph story reads, Boris Johnson's begun giving directions to his government from Chequers as Downing Street attempts to get a grip on the coronavirus crisis. But the Sunday Telegraph also notes that a new poll has found that approval of the government's handling of COVID-19's dropped from 68% to 59%, almost 10% over the last week. And those numbers are unlikely to be helped by a really weighty 5,000-word piece in the Sunday Times this morning by their Insight team. It's attracting a lot of attention this morning, and the headline is revealed how the government sleepwalked into pandemic catastrophe. It's a piece, as I say, it's 5,000 words and really needs to be read in full, but it's what the American papers would call a TikTok piece, a blow-by-blow, day-by-day account of the weeks leading up to the coronavirus crisis.
And it all turns around that decision, doesn't it, on trialling, on abandoning testing and contacting the decision on around the 12th of March.
Yeah, in summary, the Times says Boris Johnson skipped 5 Cobra meetings on the virus, calls to order protective gear were ignored, and scientists' warnings fell on deaf ears, and failings in February may have cost thousands of lives. There's a number of quotes in there which I think will be referred back to for a long time to come about the way that the government prepared for this. And as I say, over 5,000 words, it's pretty damning stuff.
Carolyn, what else have you seen?
I just wanted to say, reflecting on that piece as well, Vaughan and Stuart, that Jonathan Calvert, former chief reporter of the Western Mail, is a big part of that team, isn't he? And it was very hard to find other stories after that piece today because it was so absorbing, wasn't it, and so damning. But we will move on to a Welsh newspaper, Wales on Sunday. It's also available on Wales Online. It's a nice story. The Michelin-starred restaurants feeding NHS staff in Wales. And it looks at a collective of restaurant owners and cafe people who've got together to kind of push their skill set in a different direction. They've got James Summer in Penarth, the Walnut Tree in Abergavenny, and various places. And in one day last week, 1,700 meals were provided for NHS staff. And I was particularly interested in this quote from James Summer, and he said, "It's for us, it's a way of keeping occupied and creative." And I think we're seeing a lot of professional people looking for ways for help and thinking, how can I adapt what I'm good at? We've seen the costume departments in the kind of the big studios turning to making scrubs. We've seen Airbus making ventilators, adapting what they do.
Penderyn are making hand sanitizer, aren't they? I saw somewhere that...
Yes, yeah. People who normally make gin are turning to hand sanitizer. And I think, if there are good things to come out of this horrible time, it's people, really using what they're good at for the general good.
Stuart.
Well, we've been discussing here on Sunday Supplement for the past few weeks the way the papers are reporting plans for an exit strategy to get us out of lockdown and get back to some sort of semblance of normal life. And the Mail on Sunday and Sunday Times have obviously been briefed on the latest thoughts from inside the government on that subject. Mail on Sunday's headline is "Get Britain Moving Again." It says officials are drawing up a 3-stage traffic light plan which would see some businesses such as DIY stores and garden centres reopening and some children returning to school as early as May the 11th. The Sunday Times has been given the same steer on that story. Its headline is "Ministers plan for schools to reopen in 3 weeks." It's an eye-catching headline for parents like me who are wondering when the kids are going to be back in class, but it doesn't stand up particularly well to close scrutiny, I don't think, because the Sunday Times says despite the restrictions being eased in some parts of the continent, Denmark in particular is one country that started letting its kids back into classes. It says teaching unions are sceptical about the government's proposals to reopen schools, and an education department says no decision has been made. And aside from the schools issue, the Sunday Times suggests the hardship that we're facing during lockdown may well continue for some time to come, because the over 70s, those who are particularly vulnerable, will be on a red light in this traffic light system for months. And the third phase, the so-called green light phase in the proposed traffic light system, may not be possible until a vaccine is available. And that could be, and this is, again, guesswork, speculation, it could be the autumn of next year.
I must say, maybe you shouldn't read too much into a tone of voice, but I sense the First Minister was none too happy with those Downing Street briefed stories this morning. Carolyn, what else have you seen?
Well, also in the Mail on Sunday, not so much Get Britain Moving Again, but Get Britain Blooming Again. This is from the gardening guru Alan Titchmarsh, saying, "Unlock our garden centres and feed the nation's souls." The argument is that the horticultural industry will not survive lockdown like maybe other areas of retail because its stock is so perishable, and the big season for them, of course, is between March and May, and we've got potentially £200 million worth of plants going nowhere. But Titchmarsh makes a kind of emotional and psychological plea for reopening gardening centres. I noticed yesterday one of the most read stories online was the proposal to reopen B&Q stores, 14 of them across Britain. But Titchmarsh is saying that we need these open spaces. We need the kind of therapy of going into the gardens, and he's arguing that a visit to a garden centre might not compromise health as much as smaller shops, and not any more than a visit to a supermarket. But it also again opens up this divide of people in the lockdown. If you're lucky enough to have those spaces, a lovely garden to relax in on a sunny day, it does make it easier. And but he ends up by saying, if in assessing the essentials of life we can think no further than 100 rolls of toilet paper and toothpaste, then what was once a nation of gardeners will have definitely lost the plot.
Stuart.
Question for you both. Did you dream last night, Carolyn and Vaughan?
I did.
I don't think I did.
I'm having
I don't think I did either.
I know this is a phenomenon, isn't it, at the moment? I'm having
exactly
some really
so,
weird
Carolyn.
dreams.
The Observer suggests that the most exciting part of our days under lockdown may be the hours that when we were asleep. It says that an independent group of psychoanalysis students in London are asking people to fill out a survey about the dreams they're having. They want to try and analyse how COVID-19 is being experienced unconsciously. And so far, they found that a common trend is that people are reporting richer and more detailed dreams than usual. Why? Well, a suggestion by one of the members of the group who are looking into it is that our dreams are more interesting because our waking lives have become more dull. And the group who are looking into dreams during coronavirus have found that some of the dreams being reported have what they call a filmic quality. It says the suggestion for why this may be, why characters from TV series and films may be creeping into our dreams, is because we're spending a lot of time watching Netflix. So we're exposed to actors and celebrities and scripts when we're watching Netflix to fill the hours, and those are creeping into our dreams. And the suggestion is that our minds are reaching out to try and find something and make some sense of our lives when we're facing very little stimuli in our daily lives.
That's fascinating stuff. Carolyn?
Well, again, on the theme of escape, we will be probably watching a bit more telly than usual, and great treat in store tomorrow night. It's the final of University Challenge. The Mail on Sunday have talked about the two captains and what big characters they are. And if anybody has been watching the series, they'll know it's between Grandmaster Wang, that's Ian Wang, the captain of Corpus Christi Cambridge, and Brandon Blackwell. They call him the Scowler. He's a grimacing and brash, quote, American who provides almost half the correct answers for Imperial College London. But what I was interested in particularly with this story was that it turns out that Brandon, and he goes by just the one name on University Challenge, is actually a very experienced, almost a career quizzer. He's 26 years of age, and since the age of 14 he's won almost £300,000 from several American quiz programs, including Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and there's probably no coughing there either. And he said, I came to Britain specifically to take down the big four quiz shows. I'm here to take down the quiz shows and not to make friends. And University Challenge is almost always has to be the first one. Now, yeah. I'm interested in this because our production company makes Only Connect, which is even harder than University Challenge. Connect. Yeah, so we're waiting for Brandon. It'll be a great show tomorrow.
We shall see how Brendan does. Thank you both very much indeed for ploughing through the papers and the news websites for us this morning. Now, you can listen again to this programme on BBC Sounds. That's the app, of course, for music, radio and podcasts. And if you want advance notice of the guests and the subjects we'll be discussing, you can follow @Wales Politics on Twitter.